Good afternoon. We will call the November FM Diversion Authority Board of Directors meeting to order. First item we have is roll call of the members.
Mayor Carlson, Mayor Dardis,
Here.
Mayor Mahoney,
Here.
Mr. Peterson,
I'm here.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Here.
Mr. Pepcorn,
Here.
Mr. Ebinger,
Here.
Ms. Kolpak, Mr. Campbell,
Here.
Mrs. Sherling,
Here.
Mr. Grimberg,
Here.
Mr. Steen,
Here.
and Mr. Salzwell.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Next up is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
So move. Second.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those same sign, motion carries. Approval of order of the agenda. I believe this motion will also need to accommodate, under the consent agenda, tabling 4C2 to the December Diversion Authority meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those same side, motion carries. Now we'll have a motion on the consent agenda. What are your wishes?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the roll on approval of the consent agenda.
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Aye.
Mr. Pepcorn,
Aye.
Mr. Ebinger,
Aye.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling,
Yes.
Mr. Grimberg,
Aye.
Mr. Steen,
Aye.
and Mr. Salzwell.
Aye.
That is everyone.
Thank you. Moving on then to the regular agenda, item 5, co-executive director update. And members, I was reminded if you have a question, make sure your microphone is close so that everything is picked up accordingly, just as a gentle reminder.
Mr. Chair, members of the Diversion Authority Board, I'm not the co-deputy executive directors, but I did draft the employment agreement, and so they asked that I would come up and provide an overview of the draft or the final employment agreement with Mr. Jason Benson. Over the course of the last month, based upon the direction given by the Diversion Authority Board, I worked with the co-deputy executive directors and counsel for Mr. Benson, and we finalized the employment agreement. The draft that was initially in the packet is very close to the final agreement. I thought I'd just briefly cover off some of the high-level issues just for the board's awareness. Mr. Benson has already signed the agreement, so if the board so chooses to approve the agreement today, it would be final and we would send him a final copy. Just briefly, it is what the agreement does provide that it was at-will employment. It does outline specific job duties. One thing that is really important to note in section 3.02 is I did add in the operational policies as drafted by and adopted by this board regarding the governance, along with providing the chair regular weekly updates to monitor the performance of the executive director, and also to make sure that this board's direction was being implemented, to make that clear, and also that there would be travel requests would be approved by the chair and vice chair in accordance with the governance policies. Once again, it was just to match up the governance policies. Another change is in the term section. It is an agreement that has a one-year term that just automatically renews each and every year. If for whatever reason the board decided that you did not want to renew the agreement, you would simply provide a 90-day notice and you could get out of the agreement. I thought this was a better way to handle having an automatically renewing term unless the board so decided to not renew the term. The salary that is provided is $220,000 per year. The cost of living adjustments will be determined by the Cass County policy or the applicable policy that's drafted by this or adopted by this board, reflecting the discussions the board has had about having a cost or a salary survey and then determining what those COLAs would look like. So it really gives you the option. The default is the Cass County cost of living adjustment or the other cost of living formula that's adopted by this board. We did in here, and I did also recognize an expense section. I thought that was important just to make very clear that expenses would only be processed through the employee, not for spousal travel. So any type of travel would only be reimbursed for the employee, not for the spouse. Once again, not that we think it would be an issue, but just to clarify that. The board would also be providing a laptop computer along with a cell phone. The agreement does contain an acknowledgement that the subject to privileges and normal restrictions for attorney-client privilege, those communications on those devices are subject to open records. Just to make clear that, whatever is, being produced on that employee's computer is in fact subject to open records request. The evaluation section has also been modified to be more closely modeled after the evaluation process that was adopted by the board through the governance procedure. Just at a brief overview, the chair, vice chair, and the Cass County HR director will be providing conducting the annual evaluation of the executive director. And it's modeled after the operational expectations that were adopted by the board. And then, once again, in the section regarding termination, we did provide matching language to match up with the board's operational and governance policies regarding the authority of the chair regarding evaluations, administrative leave, and those other issues. And so, once again, Mr. Benson and his attorney have both reviewed the agreement. They have agreed to it. I think it's a good agreement. It's fair. It provides clarity, which the Moorhead City Manager loves to say, clarity is kindness, and in an employment situation. And I think it's a good model when you have employees to be very clear about operational expectations and boundaries. And so my goal here was to try to be as clear as possible about what the expectations of the board were and the procedures. Happy to answer any questions, but I think this is really good news.
Questions for Mr. Shockley? Mayor Mahoney?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Hearing none, we'll have Don take the roll.
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mr. Ebinger.
Aye.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling.
Yes.
Mr. Grimberg.
Aye.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
And Mr. Salzwell.
Aye.
And that is everyone.
Item 6, General Council update. No update, it says, in red, right here. No update. Item 7, project updates. First up is Terry Williams. Terry, you with
Good
us?
afternoon. Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay, sir?
Yes, we can.
Great. Chair Grinberg and board members, I'm happy to present the Corps' update for the month of November. For number 1 and 2, we're still resolving, finalizing the gate machinery updates, and we're pretty certain that all the training and commissioning for these 2 structures will be happening this summer to fall. Nothing new on I-29. Number 4, Red River structure, great drone footage upcoming for that one. We're at about 70% complete. The construction completion date has shifted a few days from March into April, 29 April, due to some contract modifications. Going down, nothing new to report on Drayton Dam. Number 7, Southern Embankment reached SE2A. Construction is about 75% complete, but the contractor continues to be behind schedule, and we're going to great lengths to make sure that work gets done. On to number 8, all of our 24 contract awards, the OHB ring levy is closer to 50% complete now. They did accomplish a lot with respect to getting the new storm sewer in. Reach 1B, 23% complete. SE2B, this is the big, large reach. We're about 37% complete as of today. Everybody be happy to know that County Road 16 should be open for winter traffic on or before 1 December. For our first forest mitigation contractors pretty much shutting down for the rest of the season. SC4, we're at about 4% complete. Big news, our FY25 contract awards, we have both SC3 and SC5 out for bids. SC3, the bid opening moved out a couple days. We're now opening bids on 21 November, so next week. And SC5, the bid opening is currently scheduled for 5 December. That moved out a couple days too to answer some contractor questions. And another contract we have planned for this year, this coming year, is our second forest mitigation contract, which should be advertised in December. With that, I'd love to stand for questions.
Questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Chris?
Thank you, Chair Grimberg. Quick update on the channel construction. As you see on the very north end of the map, we are starting to paint a few more things darker blue. Should be opening our first bridge here either today, tomorrow, or maybe next week. The weather this week has caused a little bit of a slowdown in that, but happy to report that we're nearing completion on the County Road 431 bridge. So we have painted that as functional. That will now allow ASN to remove a couple of road plugs that were in place that, again, anticipating we'll be able to have the channel function from basically the downstream side of the I-29, BNSF, and County Road 81 area to the outlet would be fully functional. They'll be able to connect the drains and drainage. So making some progress there, which is a good highlight for this month. Again, on the bridge piece, they're mostly moving into winter slowdown. Still a few items that are left to try to finish, and that will somewhat be weather dependent. And then they'll shift into winter construction and focus on bulk channel construction for the winter months here. And then when weather permits, they would continue to work on the bridges and the other major structures. So with that, I stand for any questions you might have related to the construction update.
Questions for Chris? Thank you, Chris. P3 monthly update. Paul?
Real quick, I'll maybe give, I think the safety
I'm
was
sorry.
the next one, Chair, so I'll
Please.
give that quick and then we'll get Paul up here. Nothing much to report on the safety side. Again, a good month in October. If you are tracking and noting the totals on there was an audit done of their entire safety program, so there were a few numbers that shifted around on the charts. Just for awareness, if you're following that month to month, that's most of the reason for that. But otherwise, I see the mayor has a question.
Chris, I thought there was a burn injury. I don't see that on here.
Yeah, Mayor, there was, that happened in November, so it doesn't hit our official reporting yet. That will be reported on our December report for that incident. So that was all I had for the safety update this month.
Further questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Paul, 7D?
So on the P3, I won't reiterate what Chris just said. The first page that is in front of you is the construction update, so we'll just let that be as is. One thing we do want to highlight, we still have 3 disputes. Then we're still, the dispute review board is still on pause, waiting for a decision from the North Dakota Attorney General concerning open meetings. So no movement on those 3 items to date. And then the other thing I want to touch on within our project controls and with our 2025 cash budget, if you look on the total that we've spent to date is just over 5 million. So through some change requests, but none of the actual milestone payments have been paid. But we are forecasting on the next page, you'll see what we're anticipating coming in this next year. And it's a rather long list. Over 235 million is what we're estimating for payments that we'll have to put out for this next year. There's a few that are pending. Some of the railroad work that may hit the books yet this year, we've got them forecasted in November. So we're trying to see if those will hit in the 2024, 2025 budget. And then the other thing I just really want to highlight for this group, we've had a big group of people that have been working behind the scenes that aren't building it, aren't designing it, but they've been doing the background and all the checking. And if you notice that there have been over 3,000 submittals as to date. We're over 3,000 reviews that have come back in. We've have over 12,000 comments on those reviews and on those things. And every one of those comments, the developer and their design team have had to address and review. So there's a big group of folks that are keeping an eye on the designs and the submittals and the plans for, and testing packets and everything that is going on out there. And I just wanted to sing their praises while I could. So are there any questions aside from those on the P3?
Commissioner Shirley.
Thank you. And this isn't to do with the P3, I guess. But I'm wondering, where does it fit and where do we start getting, I'm sorry. Rookie. Excuse me. I'm particularly concerned about the Clomars and you mentioned, you talk about the P3 and all the submittals, but what about the submittals to FEMA? And how are we tracking those? And I know it doesn't come under the P3, but I never see it show up on our project updates. And so since we're under 7 project updates before we get to the drone footage, shouldn't it be on here somewhere and we start getting regular updates monthly on that? Because from what I'm seeing out in the county, it's taking forever to get folks off flood insurance. And, what's our plan?
Sure. Thanks, Commissioner Sherling. Chair Grimberg, we are continuing to meet with FEMA. We are very much in a data gathering phase, and so far it's been very technical. We've been putting together our schedule with them and also getting all the information that they're asking for and sorting out how to bundle that. Just to give the board an update, we have had 2 sit-down face-to-face meetings with FEMA. We are intending to continue that cadence of having 2 of those sit-down meetings each year. The next one would be sometime in the first quarter of next year. In the March timeframe is generally what we have laid out. We have working groups set up where we are meeting with the FEMA review team now and working on, again, the criteria and the things we're working towards is trying to accelerate the ability to review our technical information. We've had meetings with our developer group and with the Army Corps of Engineers to start to assemble as much of the as-built information as we possibly can for the project as early as we possibly can to continue to feed that into the FEMA system. So right now, the schedules haven't changed from what we've been reporting. Just know that we're very diligently working on gathering all that information. We're going through a pretty major effort right now to update the ground information for the project to bring that up to current standards. So our teams are out collecting information for channel bathymetry and also updating the LiDAR information inside of all of our models. So again, very highly technical right now, trying to get that information collected and off to FEMA so they can start their review process of the overall submittal.
And when do you anticipate that those will be accomplished? I mean, when we're operational,
So
how long will we have to wait after we're operational that those properties get pulled out of the flood zones?
So if we're able to accelerate things as so far we're seeing capable to do, just by most of the law and required review periods that occur after we're operational, we're anticipating by 2030 we would be able to be certified. If we run into any snags, then it could take longer than that. But that's the time frame that appears to be most likely according to the schedules that we're seeing today.
Yeah, I would just suggest, because many of us probably won't be here in 2030, that, at least I won't, maybe some of you will, that you keep this board really informed tightly on this as we move forward, because I know FEMA has, when we were in the old city hall, they came and made some threats and some promises to this board, and we have followed through. And, you know, if we need to get our federal delegates to help us, I'm sure that you know, could be quite possible. So I really want to keep on top of this. This is what we promised our taxpayers, that their sales tax was going to help them with, not paying flood insurance. So let's just make sure that we keep our eye on that ball.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schilling, just to add to Chris's point, a number of us met with FEMA 2 months ago, I believe, for an update. There was a full day technical meeting, and then Mayor Carlson and I met with them to kind of get a recap of the day. And there's a lot of work yet to go into getting that goal achieved. I would say 2030 is best case. I would rephrase that, an option, but I wouldn't be surprised if it extends longer than that, to be honest. But they do know the role they have and the work they have to do. And to your point, we did mention the delegation's involvement if that needs to be as well. So, Mayor Mahoney?
Good.
Well, I talked to them as well, and the average is 5 years, so 27 would be 32. If we get to 30, that's optimistic. And I think what Chris is referencing, you have to do a lot of public hearings and have people weigh in, so it's a prescripted amount of time it takes. But to your point, we've always talked about it's $60 million in premiums that people are paying. I think all of us on the board have always said, as quick as you can get that done, get it done.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
And they'll be back in March of 25, so there'll be another meeting, sit-down meeting with them.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
Uh, 7E.
Some FM area diversion construction sites are shutting down for winter, but the project still had some notable progress. I'm Tom Fuchs, Senior Construction Manager for the Metro Flood Diversion Authority, with this month's construction update. We start the overview at the Red River structure, the largest of the 3 control structures being built, where the second 50 by 52.5 foot radial arm gate is now in place. This month, deliveries of the 3rd and final gate began. All of the deliveries are expected to arrive in the coming weeks and then be assembled on site before being installed in bay number 3. Ames Construction, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers contractor at the site, has begun excavating the borrow ditch near the westerly connection to the Red River, while also forming and placing concrete on the flood walls east and west of the structure. They also began driving piling and placing stabilization slabs beneath the west slope protection slab on the structure's upstream side. All that work brought the Red River structure to about 70% completion. About 5 miles west, just south of Horace, North Dakota, HSG Park Joint Venture 2 is wrapping up its work on the SE1B project for the season. They are constructing a short stretch of the southern embankment, which will stretch from the diversion inlet structure to the SE2A embankment reach. Nearby, we can see portions of completed roadway embankments that were constructed earlier this year in preparation for a new 3-legged roundabout that will form the future intersection of County Roads 16 and 17. This area is expected to be busy next year when multiple contractors will coordinate to construct various features of the southern embankment and the stormwater diversion channel. This is where the work of the federal and P3 programs of the FM Area Diversion Project will meet. Just a couple of miles north and west, in Reach 13 of the Stormwater Diversion Channel, ASN Constructors has continued with a lot of excavation. They moved more than 1 million cubic yards of material this month, bringing the total close to 29 of the 45 million cubic yards that needs to be moved. As winter sets in, levee embankment work will taper off, but crews will continue excavating the main channel, focusing on reaches 10 through 13, which are on the southern end. Nearby, at the County Road 6 crossing, ASN Constructors completed driving piles for the new bridge abutments and piers. Weather permitting, pile installation and substructure concrete work at select channel crossings is anticipated to continue throughout the winter. As we move north and west of the FM Metro to the Maple River Aqueduct, we can see piling and concrete work continuing as well. With the north flume wall substantially complete, crews have shifted focus to the structure's south flume wall. Work continues at the structure's adjacent wing walls as well. More than 9 miles of H-pile will be installed to support and anchor various components of the Maple River Aqueduct flume and conduit structure. Our last stop this month brings us north of the metro area to the I-29 crossing, where ASN Constructors install girders at the new northbound bridge. At both the I-29 and I-94 crossings, 4 lanes of traffic will be maintained on the completed bypasses through the winter, and work will resume in the spring. Follow along with the continued process during the winter months by following us on social media and subscribing to our monthly newsletter, The Diversion Current.
Next up, Amy.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I have a quick update on the past couple of months, actually, of our communications work. We continued the Faces of the Diversion series, introducing more people to some of those working on the project, including April Walker, who's the local affairs manager, and Ken Helvey, who's been working closely with a lot of our landowners. We also had a number of releases and interviews coordinated regarding some of the construction updates and the onboarding of the new executive director. And hopefully you saw all of those linked in the board bulletins the past couple of months. We also facilitated a number of speaking engagements. Thankfully, Chris Bockyard was able to take on many of these, and we also had help from Robert Wilson and Katie Levine to manage all of those. Tours have come to an end for the year, and I don't anticipate that will pick up for a few more months at least, so it should be a little bit quieter. On the right, you see the newsletters, and along with the statistics and open rates, there were fewer links to actually click in the November newsletter, which helps explain why there was a drop. But we will be looking very closely at a lot of those statistics as well as social media, how things are performing, times and dates that work best as we're preparing the 2025 communications plans and editorial calendar. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have today.
Questions for Amy?
Thank
Good
you.
job, thank you. Next up, lands.
Yes, good afternoon. The map before you is the usual on the left that shows the entire construction footprint. On the right is just a focus of the upstream mitigation area. Everything that's highlighted in green are property rights that we have acquired for the project. Everything in blue has been authorized for eminent domain, and we're just working through some nuances to get those filed. Everything in the dark orange, eminent domain, has been filed on those. And then the golden color means we are waiting the appraisals before we make an offer to the property owners. On the next slide, you can see within the construction footprint, those ones that are that 3% or 2.5% sitting there, those are over on SE4 and SE5. We've gone ahead, we've acquired the necessary property rights through the necessity hearings. However, we need to go through and have a hearing with the commissioners to determine just compensation. So we don't technically consider those closed until we go through that hearing process. In the UMA then, we have just over 55%, so it's up almost 1% over last month. On the next slide, you can see more specifically then, no change on the southern embankment, the upstream area, and then the environmental monitoring easements. If you go to the final slide, Peggy, we do continue to try to have settlement negotiations with those parcels that are in eminent domain. Just an emphasis on that our legal counsel, myself, do make ourselves available to any property owner who wants to come and sit in a room with us and talk to us directly. They've all been assigned land agents. I know those land agents did their due diligence in trying to work with them, and we'll continue to try to work with them through this process, trying to mitigate any opportunity to get into the trial, if we can settle it before that, if there's any opportunity. So in the last month, we did close on a couple of parcels. I know our legal team has been exceptionally busy this month, so we'll be able to report out a couple more for next month. We are continuing to dispose of the excess lands, though currently we have 30 parcels and a little over 300 acres through your consent agenda, and those who were at the Lands Committee last week. We are approving quite a bit. It would be that northeastern portion of the channel. When Chris was up here talking about a construction update, it was that part that was highlighted in dark blue. Since they're finishing the work up there, we're releasing the temporary construction easements. We're ready to go ahead and put that through the policy. We are starting to receive appraisal reports for the Christine area flowage easements. One thing that's not up here is next month we'll also be approving appraisals for the Cheyenne River benching project. Madeline's hard at work for the farmland leases for 2025, and just a reminder that we do have vacate dates for all Minnesota properties and the structures on them of April 1st for Clay County and June 1st for Wilkin County. Any questions that I can answer?
Questions for Jody?
Okay,
Get off easy this month. Mayor Dardis.
Chairman Grinberg, the Finance Committee met yesterday. There were $8,277,666.69 of bills that were presented to the Finance Committee. Our net cash position is $630,637. For the month, we brought in $17 million worth of sales tax collections, and to date, the revenues for 2024 thus far is $163,592,000. So we're continuing to monitor everything very closely as 2025 comes about with some of these payments that we're going to be having to do, up to $200 to $235 million. So there's going to be continuously monthly reports on the sales tax revenues that come in, and I thank you, Chairman Grinberg, for your assistance on that. If you look at the reports that did come up that are in the package, we have even forecasted what the rest of October, November, and December will be for 2024 to give us kind of an accurate feeling. The reports go back to 2018, so we can rely on some historical revenue collections as we move forward. It was called to my attention that one of our members was possibly his last meeting yesterday, Commissioner Chad Peterson. I can't thank you enough for your leadership on the diversion, as well as your expertise on the Finance Committee. So Commissioner Peterson, thank you so very much. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman. If there are any questions.
Questions for Mayor Dardis? Paul and Mike, 10A and 10B.
Thank you, Chair Grimberg. if the board will recall, we were going to present this last month, but due to the abbreviated business meeting and then the interviews afterwards, we decided to push this off to this month. And so what I'd like to do is do a couple of different things. As Mayor Dardis noted, within your packet is kind of the trends and the actual data of that. I'm not going to go through that in much detail. I'll let you dig into that. But mostly the annual sales tax summary, you can see basically what the average growth has been and where we're headed. I asked John Shockley to kind of give an overview, as he did yesterday, as to the basis of the sales tax and where is it coming from and when's it going to expire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Diversion Authority Board. As I went over yesterday, there are a number of sales taxes that are pledged to the authority. The first is from Cass County. That was originally approved in 2011 by the voter, or 2010 by the voters, and became effective in 2011. In 2016, that was put on the ballot for an extension out to 2084. Otherwise, it would have expired in 2031. The City of Fargo is also pledging 2 half-cent sales taxes. The first is from Article 321. That's a half-cent sales tax. Once again, that had an expiration date, a sunset date in 2031. In 2016, the voters overwhelmingly approved extending that sales tax out to 2084. The City of Fargo also has an additional sales tax that was originally approved in 2012. That is Article 322. That was also subject to an extension by the voters in 2016 out to 2084. Combine that as 1.5 cent sales tax that has been pledged through its sunset date to the repayment of the debt on the project, or until such time as the debt is repaid. You'll recall that the authority has taken out debt through US EPA WIFIA that provides a very low cost interest. In today's world, it's incredibly low. It's at 2.08% interest, which I don't believe that we'll see that in the foreseeable future, those types of interest rates again. And that is used to pay, in addition, the SRF loan and some of the other sales taxes. In addition, the City of Fargo has pledged 1/4 of its 1 cent infrastructure sales tax. That is Article 320 of the City Code. That is anticipated to sunset in 2028 unless a decision is made to submit that 1 cent sales tax to the voters by the City of Fargo for an extension. That is not pledged to the repayment of the debt, because you can't pledge the sales tax after the date of the sunset. So currently, the 1/4 cent is pledged to the authority, but only through its sunset date of 2028. Happy to answer any other questions here. Just kind of tag teaming with Paul. So,
Questions?
So the question becomes, and what I wanted to touch on here quickly is, how do we use this data? How do we utilize sales tax? Numbers are good, but what does it actually mean? If you look at our cash budget and our proposed cash budget, every year our basis of the cash budget, if you could scroll to the bottom, Peggy, the funding resources and the funding sources, the top 2 lines of that are sales tax and our projected revenues through those sales taxes. And up until this year, every year we've basically used that as part of our cap, that our spending was capped by our funding. So what we had available through our sales tax and then other legacy bonds and the SRF funds, those were our basic income sources. This year, with the $235 million that we saw for payments to the developer, we're going to be having to tap into our WIFIA loans and start utilizing draws on loans, taking out loans that way. So on an annual basis, we've been utilizing the sales fund, sales tax as kind of our cap, as paying our day-to-day expenses, and then also working through the legacy bonds and state funding. The legacy bonds, as you see on this chart, are we're working our way through them, and we anticipate being all the way through those by probably September or so of 2025, and so that will actually put a greater pressure on our sales tax and the sales tax growth to make sure that we can continue to keep things moving forward. Each year on year, the budget rolls into our program budget. So our program budget is then built off of these, and those are reported out on a total basis within our finance committee and our financial packets as to where we're at going forward, how much we've spent and where we're going forward. The last way that we utilize this sales tax, and looking at the projections of where it's going to be after construction is complete, we have our financial plan. And that is basically, what is it going to take? How much are we going to have to utilize to pay back any debt that we might have accrued to build the project? And so if you could go to that other chart, Peggy. So this is just a chart of some anticipated what we're looking at for worst case scenario for debt that we could accrue through construction. The purple is the WIFIA loan, and so that's assuming that we're going to utilize everything under the WIFIA loan. There's some SRF dollars, there's some other sales bonds, subordinated sales tax bonds in there too. And way back when, we set a goal for the 1.5% sales tax growth, that we were trying to make sure that everything would fit underneath there. Unfortunately, with the cost of construction and inflation and different things, we're pushed up to about that 2.8 to 3% sales tax growth range, especially in the first, say, 10 years of that repayment of that debt. And so that's, when we start talking about projections and sales tax growth, this is where we utilize it after construction to include and to assure that we can pay for the project and pay off the debt. So, are there any questions on
Questions for Paul?
sales tax? I would be more than happy to meet with you one-on-one and have a couple-hour discussion on this and get into the weeds if you would like, but
Encourage everyone to do that. Mayor Mahoney?
I just got a report from the Corps and the cost of the project and where we're sitting. I'm under the impression if there's excess in the Corps, if their bidding is lower than the excess, that's to be returned to the project to cover our costs if sales tax doesn't cover it. They had an inflationary in there, John. I think you talked about it, that it would inflation beyond 750. I think we're at 820 million or something like that with the inflationary cause with the Corps. Are we factoring in this model at any time, any money coming back from the Corps?
So Mr. Chair, Mayor Mahoney, so first of all, you're correct. Under the PPA that was negotiated, any funds in excess of core construction costs are supposed to come back to the local non-federal sponsor, which would be the Diversion Authority. That is after all of the construction costs are wrapped up, and they'll be in a cost accounting and some other issues. And so one thing I just want to caution is that even day one after the construction wraps up with the Corps, it may be several years before there's a final cost accounting from the Corps that will determine what that delta is. The PPA does provide a cost escalation figure that will ultimately have to be worked out with the Corps, what that final cost accounting looks like. To the second question, our financial model, going back to what Paul had indicated from a conservative standpoint, we had not taken into account the repayment of the core money. One of my fundamental components of building the financial plan was to take a conservative view of how the financial plan would operate. And because we did not know at the time that specific timing of the federal funds, as you can see in the chart, timing is important. If you were to receive 25 or $30 million in 2028 in net present value, that means a lot more than receiving $50 million 10 years later. And so we did not plan that into the financial plan because of just the uncertainty of how much that would look like. And also, when we were planning the financial plan, when we had reached close with the WIFIA loan, recall that the federal portion hadn't been fully funded yet. That occurred after the WIFIA closed, and that was due to the strong efforts of our both the North Dakota congressional team and the Minnesota congressional team, along with the Office of Management and Budget and core leadership. So,
The other question on that, John, is there's a drain tax that comes in here sometime as well, 27, 28. I'm not sure which year you said that comes in. And there's an O&M that's been discussed as well. Where is that paid out and who is it from?
yeah, great question, Mayor Mahoney. The Diversion Authority has multiple sources of revenue for the O&M that's provided in the financial plan. The excess sales tax that is available after the repayment of debt is first applied to O&M. To supplement the O&M, you have the ability to collect on the drain tax that is imposed as part of the improvement district upon substantial completion of the project. That is also part of the providing funding for the operations and maintenance. And then in addition to that, the Minnesota entities have pledged through Moorhead has pledged its stormwater fees that it collects. Unlike cities on the North Dakota side, the city of Moorhead can collect a stormwater maintenance fee, so they've pledged a portion of that proportionate to their share of the project. And Clay County has also made a pledge that regarding its operations and maintenance requirement, that the collection method of for that hasn't been fully defined yet because there was some thought about potentially working with the Buffalo Red Watershed District regarding its ability to levy a similar type of drain levy tax as on the North Dakota side.
It's just my request if we can look at all sources of funding other than sales tax. So what other elements are going to enter into that? I think that would be helpful for the board so we can see some options. Also talking to Susan yesterday, there's some different ways of handling some of our bond payments or different things like that. So would like the finance team to fully look at full options before we talk about a sales tax or something like that. Thank you.
And to maybe add on to that question a little bit, when we put together the financial plan as a requirement to achieve the WIFIA financing, we had to have the framework of our operations and maintenance funding in place. And so the maintenance, operation and maintenance funding is in place. We can certainly look for additional sources of revenue and provide that, but there are some already obligated sources, and contained within the master indenture of trust, there are some reserve funds that have been built for potential, if there was ever a slowdown in sales tax, there's about a year of reserve fund built up for the WIFIA funds, and then also for a P3 payment if that's due, but that only lasts a year. And if everything works out perfectly, and I've seen this happen a couple times in sales tax deals, at the end of 25 or 30 years, if you haven't touched that reserve fund, that can be used to make your final debt service payment. What is different about the master indenture of trust, because we were dealing with such large amounts in reserve funds, each year the trustee sweeps that extra interest over to the authority. So in the early years, it didn't make much, like $16 million with interest at 0.025% didn't amount to much, but now that the interest rates are higher, the trustee is sweeping in more interest earnings back to the authority. And so that's kind of a unique part of the master indenture of trust. Once again, like Paul, I'm happy to get into the minute details of the project.
Okay. I'll have some additional comments in my closing comments on this topic as well, but for now, we'll go to 10B.
Sure. The other item that we deferred from last month is just a request for looking at contracts and what sort of work and who all is under contract and who is all working for the Diversion Authority. And within your packet, you'll see the list. It is quite a lengthy list, 2 pages long. We are touching on a lot of different areas. We have broken it down to some of the office, some of these various areas. So kind of the technical area, the office, and then the communications and legislation. And then we get into our land and property contracts, which gets into our appraisers, gets into our people like Ken Helvey that was highlighted that work directly with the property owners. And then we get into our insurance agents and insurance work that we're doing that way. And the last area, as you kind of go down, you can kind of see some of the demolition work, but then our debt service partners and some of the other contracts that expenses that we're going to have as we go through the project. So all in all, a rather extensive group, but we are actively looking to close out contracts as quickly as we can, and to try and free up as much of these contracts and the costs that are assigned to those contracts as quickly as we can. A lot of these, especially what you see in front of you, the utility relocations, those are pretty much complete. This is a list from 23 and 24. The majority of that work was done in 23 and early 24. So this next year, we should see a marked decrease in the number of utility costs and relocations that we've had to do. So like I said, a lot of data that's there, a lot in front of you. If you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them now. Otherwise, I'd also be happy to, again, sit down and go through this list with any of our commissioners.
Questions for Paul? Thank you, sir. 11, other business. First up, 11A, Commissioner Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In October, as we start moving forward with the Minnesota legislature coming forward and with our request for Minnesota funding on this project, we had asked to meet with Paul and others in setting up what all things are still to be done on the Minnesota side of the river that would qualify for state funding. And so we went through and established quite a list. I don't know if we have the access to that document or not to show the board, but I believe we're right around $60 million. Paul, is that yeah, like that make a head nod yes on that. So then we, after we had those meetings and determined that, I asked that this be placed in the Diversion Planning Committee meeting for discussion, with the idea in mind that we were looking for a letter of support from the Diversion Board of Authority for our funding request in St. Paul. And so that's really what this resolution is all about, is getting the Diversion Authority to provide a letter of support for us as we go to the state for Minnesota funding on this project.
Questions for Commissioner Campbell? Motion?
Move to approve.
Commissioner Peterson?
Second.
Discussion?
Commissioner Campbell, just curious whether you're going to try a different strategy on this. Is there a way of trying to get this to move forward? I know locally sometimes it's not as, you had some powerful legislatures at one time that were very helpful to do that, but is there any other route you guys are thinking about in order to try to get it? I know they had a lot of flooding in Minnesota. I think you're up against people that have damaged areas, right?
Right.
So it'll be a hard trust because you're doing prevention, you're not rebuilding.
And we've from the county level, just at our board meeting this last Tuesday, we have three major priorities in state funding for Clay County this year. And the diversion project is one of those three major funding. In terms of how we're going to actively approach this, of course, we constantly meet with legislatures not only within our area, but try to reach out beyond that. And we have two commissioners, Commissioner Mojo and Commissioner Krabenhoff, we've designated them to spend more time in St. Paul this year than we have in the past in working on not only this, but the other two. We have, like I said, we had three major needs that we were looking for funding. And so we're going that route. Do you have anything?
I think something else that's noteworthy is we're going to work with our Moorhead colleagues in unison on this. We're not going to split up the pie and argue against each other. So there will be a unified presentation on this. Chamber has been extremely good with setting up meetings and getting us set up to plead our case. But again, with no bond issues last year, the way the session ended, there's a lot of people with flood damage, with issues, and they're lining up for this. So we're going to have to go in and exert some real emphasis on it.
Well, I know just Chairman Grinberg next year just loves to do legislative issues, so he'll give you a hand on any of this. But strategy worked in North Dakota. We got bonding, so if we could work that vigorously to do that over there, I'd appreciate it.
That's what we're looking at. And I will remind you, the footprint that Cass County has in Bismarck's a little different than what Clay County has in St. Paul, but we are getting the point across to them on a lot of things.
No, but Dave, you have a $5 billion thing going in there, right?
I was just going to mention that. I think that anytime that we see, and obviously that's really exciting news for Moorhead and Clay County when you get that kind of a business investment that's coming to your area, and we will certainly use that as another reason to have fully funded flood protection on our side of the river. So we'll incorporate everything we can, including that recent news on that business.
You build it right. If you have a leak, it stays on your side, right?
Well, we have neighbors that are a little bit lower than us. It's been brought to their attention.
Okay, hearing no other.
Let's keep reminding them.
Hearing any other pertinent comments, we'll take the roll.
Mayor Dardis. Yes. Mayor Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mr. Emminger.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Mrs. Sherling.
Yes.
Mr. Grinberg.
Aye.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
And Mr. Salzwell.
Aye.
How's everyone?
Mr. Darrell Richardson is next. We had the opportunity to view his presentation at planning earlier this month, and I'm quite confident that Commissioner Pepcorn is going to love this presentation.
Well, Chairman Grinberg, all the members of the board, thank you very much for the opportunity to come in and give you a report on the $250,000 grant that was allotted to me through the North Dakota Agricultural Weather Network. And so we will go, can I just push what?
You can use the keyboard too. Just use the arrows.
Yeah. Can I go full screen here? Yeah. There we go. Now push the buttons. All right, there we go. So anyway, I'm the director of the North Dakota Agricultural Weather Network, as well as the state climatologist for the state of North Dakota. And so this, I just wanted to first off show you the coverage of the North Dakota Agricultural Weather Network. Some of the stations on here are going to be installed next year in 2025. And the blue circles you see are 20-mile circles. Generally speaking, a lot of the parameters that we do offer are valid out to a circle of 20 miles. So a lot of times I like to show the entire coverage of what we have. This is what one of our tower stations actually looks like. This is a drone footage. A couple of things you will notice on here is there's a round circle on that map, which I'll show you in a second. Hard to see, there's some orange stakes down there that I'll be covering in more detail. But very quickly, before I get to the report on how we spent the money, I just wanted to explain to you what NDAWN actually is. The North Dakota Agricultural Weather Network is really a weather risk management tool. Our purpose is to use weather data to predict the future. In agriculture, we're able to predict the timing of when certain insects will come out, when diseases are going to form, when farmers should be able to spray, and when they should not be able to spray. And so all of this knowledge brings a very strong value proposition to all of our stakeholders. And our use extends far beyond agriculture. And one of my purposes here this afternoon is to explain one of those purposes. So here's a close-up view of one of these devices that is inside this little circle surrounded by a fence. And this was a view from Cooperstown just around noon today from one of our cameras. Now, I would be probably disappoint some people if I didn't tell you my current bad joke that I always tell at this point in my talks. Why do we need these circles and these fences around the precipitation gauge inside? Well, I always tell people that they're in the Century Code in North Dakota and state law in Minnesota. There is a law that explicitly states that all snow must fall horizontally within the state borders. And we learned that very well earlier this week. And so because all of our snow does tend to fall horizontally, those fences around that gauge in the middle actually slows down the wind speed and allows the precipitation to fall inside that gauge. That gauge is actually weighing the precipitation. So if it's in the form of hail, if it's graupel, if it's snow, if it's rain, 1 inch weighs 1 inch, no matter what form it actually comes down. It is very difficult to measure the water equivalency of snow because it wouldn't go into a traditional rain gauge very well. So what this does is it actually weighs that, so we're able to determine the amount of snowfall. These are the end-on stations in the city nearby where the $250,000 grant monies from the Diversion Authority Board actually came to for fruition here. And it is 18 cities on here that you will see, 16, apology, and all of them are in North Dakota except the ones mentioned in Minnesota. To give you a view of this, number one, we were able to put gauges in the upper Cheyenne Valley. So especially up in Sheridan County where the Cheyenne River starts, we were able to put some stations in the middle part of the Cheyenne River Valley, and also, especially on the Minnesota side, south of Fargo-Moorhead, and where the diversion is going to come, or water flow is going to be coming from. Plus, we were able to put one of these gauges also at our Brampton, North Dakota station, which is very close to the headwaters of the Wild Rice. So the headwaters of the Cheyenne, headwaters of the Wild Rice, and in many ways the headwaters of the Red River. This is just a map with circles to show you in blue where the sites were, and a different format here that you all sponsored through us, south and then northwest of the Cheyenne River. I wanted to show you this map. This is the rain totals since yesterday. And if you look very carefully on this, you'll notice there's a lot of zeros. Those are sites where we don't have an all-season gauge. The snow cannot be measured very well. So this is the last 2 days from our all-season gauges. And so if you look off to our south, you can see the precipitation totals and all through the Red River Valley and the Cheyenne River basins. And this is a 7-day total. And the reason I wanted to show you this is a mix of rain and snow, of course, but imagine it's March 15th of 2025. This map, all these stations, we will have this online, will give us a demonstration of how much moisture we have accumulated in the next 4 months. Beginning really in many ways yesterday, most of the precipitation that falls in the next 120 days will be sitting there waiting and will have no opportunity to move through the system until the next spring melt. So there's a number of basins in here. You know, there's the Wild Rice, there's the Maple, there's the Red, there's the Cheyenne. All of these basins, we'll be able to determine where our gauges are, how much precipitation fell during this time frame. So when the spring melt begins next spring, we will have this as a running total continually through the next 4 months of what's actually going to come through the system. The soil is going to be frozen. Most of what falls will not penetrate into the soil. Unfortunately, the recent rain, which had some benefits, one big disadvantage is it really eliminated a lot of the absorption power we might have next spring for any potential flooding that we do have. Speaking of which, soil water, most people call this soil moisture. Yes, that's my head in the hole. My staff loves to take these pictures of me when I'm out in the field working with them. But these are stations in the North Dakota Agricultural Weather Network that we have soil water probes in place. Next end of January of 2025, the National Weather Service in Grand Forks will issue their first flood statement of the year. In there, they will mention at fall freeze-up this was the soil moisture content. Where are they getting that data? Mostly from us, the North Dakota Agricultural Weather Network. Now, this is the darker the blue, the more moisture that's currently in the soil. You notice the Red River Valley, 10 days ago, this was not a lot of moisture. We got 2 months worth of precipitation this past week. So you notice at 2, 4, and 8 inches, a lot of dark blue. So we really saturated the soils in the Red River Valley, but we haven't frozen yet. We will see at fall freeze up exactly what's there. It's another feature that we offer through NDAWN. If you look very carefully, that device right there is a sonic snow depth sensor. It sends sound waves down to the ground, to that board, and upwards. We can determine in turn what the snow depth is. Your first thought living here is, Daryl, the snow depth varies by an inch because the wind blows it around. We learned that again this week as well, and that's a very good point. This is where we have snow depth sensors, and we are continuing to work on adding these, but because of the wind problem, we have snow depth stakes, 3 of them. This is an example of them. This is up in Skogmo by Skogmo Lake in northern Sheridan County, very close to where the Cheyenne River begins. And you'll notice if you look very carefully, it has about 3 inches of snow on the ground. We have all of these stations, several of them nearby and south of Fargo-Moorhead, that have cameras on it. So not only do we have soil moisture for the fall, we have cameras measuring the snow depth all winter, sonic snow depth sensors to measure it as well, plus the all-season gauges that will be able to determine how much moisture has been in the snow for the upcoming season. Therefore, in turn, this will help the North Central River Forecasting Office in Chanhassen beginning their flood forecasting, which will give us more than likely more than enough lead time when the diversion is operational to get that operational, or for the next couple of winters until that actually comes in. All the maps and a lot of the information I just showed you is on ndawn.info. I encourage you throughout the winter to look at that. There's a climatology page, and then if you go to the currents, one of the things is precipitation. It'll say 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 30 days, 60 days. And if you're a weather nerd like me, you can keep track of how much water has been in the snow that we had all fall. So again, I'm Daryl Richardson, the director of NDAWN and also the state climatologist of North Dakota. Chairman Grinberg, any members of the board, I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time. By the way, I forgot to mention very quickly, the grant you gave us expired on October 31st. And last I had looked this morning at everything, I do believe we came approximately $10,000 under budget.
Well, that's great. Questions? What's the temperature tomorrow?
Cold.
Thank you, Daryl.
Thank you very much for the time.
I have 2 things before we close out here. Part of it's follow up to Mayor Mahoney's comments. Mayor Carlson and I are meeting next week to kind of talk through transition as she moves through her chair year, and I start to prepare for chairing the Diversion Authority next year. The goal also is to sit down with staff. I'd like to do that in December, as well as our program leads to capture where we're at and what should be our goals for 2025, as well as outline our risks for 2025. I share that because I intend to make a presentation at the first meeting in January with a culmination of all that information, and also dialogue with Jason Benson before he starts February 1st. So we've got kind of a clear path between December, January, and he comes on board on February 1st. I encourage you to reach out to co-executive directors or myself with thoughts and ideas what that should look like, because I believe as we move into 2025, the work's going to get a little more closer to completion, but yet a little more challenging. And so from all sources of revenue, I agree, Mayor Mahoney, that your point about the Army Corps dollars is certainly an area to look at. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, if we need sales tax option in 26, we need to be talking about it in 25. We don't know the answers to those questions today, but talking about it, and as we move through putting more puzzle pieces together, we'll be smarter in that decision process. So I share that as just thoughts on where I see, taking on this role. Still trying to convince Mayor Carlson to do it another year, and that's not going very well. So with that said, partial recognition for Commissioner Peterson, for Mayor Dardis. Commissioner Sherling, we do have a gift for you, but not today. But as Vice Chair filling in today, it's been a joy working with you for 2 years on the County Commission. I think we all owe you a debt of gratitude for your leadership at the county as well as this authority. And I deeply appreciate your commitment. I believe other authority members would like to share some words as well, and we'd like to hear from you because you've made a difference and made a real impact. So I'll open it up for other comments from members.
You both have been excellent members of the commission in helping us get to where we are today. And I know, Mary, you're the one who first started us with executive director and just transitioning to that, and the trials and tribulations you personally went through during that time, in which some of us took barbs. You took quite a few barbs at public meetings, so I really appreciate that. And people like to give Chad a hard time, but his heart has always been in this project and really has helped it to advance it to where it is. It's hard to see people who have been with the project from the beginning almost that now you're going off the board. But I don't think we'd be where we are today if we hadn't had your leadership and being on the board and helping us get over the hurdles. And Tony and I talked about this. It's not often you're on the board where oftentimes the vote is 13-zip because we all agree with where we're headed. And we all, as different political venues that we represent, it's important that the goal is the flood protection, and we've carried that. And I think, Mary, the other thing you did, you've always been polite to people, and you took some barbs one time in which you smiled and were polite, but very much appreciate that. Chad, you probably didn't smile as much and polite, but you at least made your point, so thank you both.
Well, thank you for those kind words. And thanks to everyone in this room, for getting us to this point. It has really been, it's taken a village to get us here. And I would just like to recognize a few people, starting off with former Cass County Commissioner Darrell Vanyo, who really mentored me in my role when I became chair of this organization. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of players, and he was instrumental in showing me the ropes and who I needed to talk to, and that really kind of kicked it off for me. The staff probably, wasn't aware of my leadership in 2019 because we didn't have a staff then. We had our consultants, but we didn't have an executive director. So we would meet once or twice a week, and we'd all, do the huddle, and then we'd all run out and do what needed to be done. And it was a lot of tremendous effort from just a ton of folks. And I can start in the back there. Nathan Borboon, Dr. Bob, and Jason Benson. I mean, you guys, all those technical meetings. It was, and trips that we made back and forth, whether it be to Bismarck and Martin plowing through the snow with a group of us, and several to DC, and we did trains, planes, and automobiles one time with Tim driving us back. He dropped me right off at the courthouse when we got back to town, and that was a pretty interesting trip on ice coming back from Minneapolis. Just so many memories of how all the efforts that went in, Martin Nichols, John Shockley. When I was chair, we resolved our legal issues. We got our DNR permit. We got federal funding. The list goes on, but I'll tell you, every time we would get over a hurdle, there'd be another one that was thrown in our way. You talk about the meetings that we went to. I could thank the Sheriff's Department for being there, and they were needed there. It was, we had some parking lot incidences with the Clay County Commission and I will tell you, at all of those meetings, the person that was there by my side every single time was Eric Dodds, and I can't thank him enough for all the hard work he's done on this project that people maybe don't realize. the hard work that he has put into behind the scenes. And of course, Jody Smith has really worked hard on getting us the lands acquisitions in the last few years, and her and Eric's team have really worked hard on that. And I would just, in addition to this whole group that's put this together, I think one other thing that we can really feel proud about is that the framework that this organization has laid down for us to do other work, such as the Triple RDC, which is moving along now, and they were really stuck for a while, and we took what we'd already done and done successfully and just transferred it to another project. So, and we're such a unique community that we span 2 states and, 2 counties and 2 cities. And so I think we all deserve credit for all the hard work everyone's done. And Mayor Dardis, thank you for joining us on this board as well. So at any rate, thank you all. I'm gonna miss it. I'm looking forward to a big flood in 2030-ish when we can just sit back and relax and have a glass of wine.
Gratitude. I've been put into a position I was never worthy of. Calm down. Getting to know the mayors, the commissioners, city and Clay has been a true blessing. This was never on my radar screen. As I said during our commission meeting, I never thought this was a thing. The county governance certainly was never on my radar screen. And again, not worthy of anything I've been allowed to do, that's for damn sure. 12 years of fun, this has been a blast. Not just the policy things, but more importantly than anything, and I said this for our state association too, it's the people. Policy fun, statewide fun, federal fun. The people is what has made this so much fun for me. I've always said I've never liked the weather since I was little. I've hated it. But the people, that's what kept me and my family in this town, in this region, because I don't care what anybody says, we are built differently in the upper Midwest, exponentially better in the Fargo-Moorhead metro area. And I love our friends in northern Minnesota and throughout North Dakota. We are different than everyone else. And that's okay to say that because we're good, genuinely good people that want good things. And sometimes things like this impact our neighbors negatively. And I think what we've done as a board, and as Mary said perfectly, Commissioner Schilling said perfectly, we're just sitting in a seat that others have sat in before us. And people will sit here after us. And what we have put in place through all the struggles, the tumult and trial, allows that to proceed. And I think with all the negativity that we've thrust upon some of our neighbors, I don't know that we could have done it any better. And my struggle there has always been that the folks that think there was a better way, some are not maybe being as honest as they could be, but my struggle there has always been the people that genuinely think there was a better way, and there never was. I wish there was. I wish there could have been cheaper. I wish there could have been less people impacted. This was the least impactful, most cost-effective project we could have built. And the negativity, it's sort of what it was. I have friends that were impacted. We all do, for that matter. Where I grew up in North Fargo, friends that had houses taken away, and we had friends that had land that was being taken away or will be borrowed from should a flood transpire. So long story short, blessings. Thank you for getting to know me and tolerating my attitude and sometimes my forthrightness in my opinions. To the staff and team members, God bless you all. You're not done yet. Some of us won't be here, and you'll probably still be there. This project isn't done. We're close. We're closer every day. But I think once we get closer to the finish, it's what I've said in my construction job, any human being on the planet can build anything up to 95%. I don't care whether it's a shed in your backyard, a biotechnology lab. Any one of you could do exactly what I do for a living. But that last 5% is what makes a project. That's where we need people like you to help us push through that last 5%, because that's where things get cumbersome, troublesome, and sometimes exceedingly expensive. So blessings to you. I'm glad to have gotten to know each and every one of you to one degree or another. And Godspeed going into the future as well with Mr. Benson, your new leader. when he takes his spot. I think our friends in the legislature also need gratitude. They didn't have to support this either. Our friends in Minnesota, soon too, they won't have to support this, but I know they will. To our friends in the federal government, they didn't have to support this either. They could have gone a different direction. It could have been far easier to walk away, but they didn't. And I firmly believe, as I've said from the start of my election, this will be the project that the United States will model projects after into perpetuity. This is the way to get infrastructure done. State, local, federal partners doing the best thing they can for their local constituents and the populations that are impacted. This is the model for the next century. Thank you. God bless you all. This has been so much fun, Mr. Chairman.
We are adjourned.